Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Ray Hall Talking College Ball. Tonight, obviously, the college football second edition of CFP playoff committee rankings have been released, so just going to do a quick impromptu episode covering that. Um, First, I'm going to start out with their top 25 and kind of go in comparison to my top 25 and see what they, I guess, valued more than what I valued more. And excuse me if my dog jumps on me here. I had to keep him in the room for the recording, so. Um, but basically, I was looking at what they did compared to mine, and 10 out of my top 12, or all of my top 12 teams were correct compared to theirs. I think the only 24 out of 25 of the teams on their ranking are the same I have in mine. The major difference really being USF versus JMU. But 10 out of the top 12 were the actual exact positions that they had in ranking. Really, the big switch there was Indiana still being ranked number 2 and Texas A&M being ranked at 3. I have no problems with that, no qualms with that. Penn State, if you look at their roster, it's a top probably 15, 20 roster in college football. Maybe not that high. Definitely a top 25 roster in college football. And it was a home game for the Nittany Lions. It's tough to play in Beaver Stadium, so no qualms with them keeping Indiana at 2. I thought kind of how Texas Tech jumped Ole Miss in an impressive win, that Texas A&M in an impressive win over Missouri, and a kind of, I don't want to say a lackluster win, but not at least the expected outcome with Indiana over Penn State. I thought that would kind of happen, but no problems there with actually how that worked out. I'm glad the committee looked at Texas Tech and said, yeah, you know what? This team deserves to be ranked higher. They could even push for a top 4 seed and a whole first round bye, which I really think is possible moving into this season. Generally, like you kind of have, I don't want to say these non-power 2 teams, but the Big 12 and ACC, there is kind of a step down in what you see at their top level comparatively to what you see at the top level in the Power 2. Texas Tech, I don't think they have that noticeable step down. The only really big qualm about it that I have, or I guess not qualm, but the only thing that stands out against me for Texas Tech is their inability to score touchdowns in the red zone. I mentioned that earlier in episodes. I think if they play one of these top 12 teams, specifically one from the Power 2 conference or Notre Dame, and they do not convert in the red zone, they are going to get ran off the field. That defensive line is nasty. They have the sack leader in Bailey. It is very good defense. Rodriguez, some people are saying a Heisman push for him. Cool, put him up there. I'm happy with that. He's a good player. But really what is going to take them to that next level is, can their offense score touchdowns when they get into the red zone? If you look at the top teams, Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, I mean, I just list them all off there. But how they kind of step up above everyone else is when they get into the red zone, they come away with 6 and not 3. Um, you can even look at a team like Texas. They're kind of in the lower rankings, still higher ranking, second highest ranked 2-loss team. But a big problem with them is their red zone efficiency. So I think if you kind of look at the first game of the year, Ohio State versus Texas, if Texas was able to kind of convert when they got past the other half of the field into Ohio State territory, that game could have been different. Obviously, a lot of games could have been different if you're able to convert in the red zone. But this is what holds these teams back in these top matchups. Even shout out to another Texas-Ohio State matchup last year in the college football playoff. Texas is down score, I think they're down 8. So they need a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to tie it up against Ohio State. And they are on the goal line. What happens to Texas? They've been mentioning all year, Texas has been struggling when they get into the red zone and goal-to-go possessions. They couldn't convert. They had the play blown up by Caleb Downs. You can argue if that was the right play call or not. I think Caleb Downs just made a great play. We've gone over that multiple times since it's happened. But regardless, if you don't have these go-to plays, these go-to advantages in the red zone, then it's going to be a problem. And you saw it for Texas against Ohio State last year in the playoffs. Obviously, it's not going to turn into a 99-yard or 95-yard touchdown the other way for the defense every single time. But when you settle for 3 versus getting 6, it's a big problem. That's kind of the reason why people love the goal line fade so much. I think Brooks Austin covered this it was probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I'm not sure if he covered it specifically or just mentioned it. I do remember listening to him. But the reason why people love the goal line fade is it's a 50-50 shot. If your guy is bigger, taller, faster, stronger, whatever, it is the odds are tipped in your favor. Um, Especially if you have a guy that can even fake the fade and then run the slant on the inside. If he's manned up 1-to-1 and they have to respect your run game, then the odds get tilted in your favor even more. So Texas Tech needs to develop kind of, hey, what are we going to be when we get into the goal line situations or red zone situations? It doesn't even have to be, I'm just going to out athlete this guy. You look at a program like Alabama. Alabama, they should have some of the best athletes on the field if you look at their recruiting rankings and everything like that, but they don't rely on that. Ryan Grubb is a very creative play caller. He runs different things, different eye candies, gets different looks, gets Caden Proctor involved somehow, some way to try and get into the end zone. I'm not saying that Texas Tech needs a 6'7", 360-pound offensive lineman taking snaps from them at quarterback for them to be efficient in the red zone, but they need to figure out something. I think that is the last thing for them to unlock. If they can unlock, hey, when we get within 20 yards, we will score touchdowns. We'll come away with 6 points rather than 3 points. Then I think they're a top 4, top 5 team. I'll say top 4 to even get a bid or a playoff bye. But I think it's a tall tale to ask for them. The only way I really see them getting a bye at this point is if an Alabama loses a game, then still makes the SEC championship, and then losing the SEC championship, and Texas Tech wins the Big 12 championship, or Ohio State fans cover your ears, but Ohio State loses to Michigan, still makes the Big 10 championship, loses Indiana, and they get in that way. I think it's kind of at this point hard for them to climb into that top 4, whether they deserve it or not. But I think the top 5 position is definitely up for grabs. Georgia's more than likely going to be sitting at home during championship weekend. So if Texas Tech goes 11-1 regular season, comes away with the Big 10 or Big 12 championship, I don't think there's any reason to keep them out of a top 5 spot. Have them match up with USF in the first round, at least how it's projected now. Now, if I'm Texas Tech, I'm not sure if I want to match up with USF. I'm not saying that USF is some world beater, but it has a hard offense to game plan for. They have a lot of variables in the game. They're kind of known as a giant slayer as it is. So I'd be careful wishing for that. But I think if you ask them, hey, would you rather match up against USF or a Miami that gets in, what are you looking for? I think they would probably take the USF matchup. All right, now moving through like the rest of the top 25 rankings. They didn't have Pitt as high as I did. They have Pitt at 22. I had Pitt at 20. No problems with that. I think they had Louisville, and Louisville was a little bit lower on their ranking than my ranking. Once again, no problems with that. Tennessee jumping to 23. I had them at 24. They had a bye week. I didn't really think they needed to jump 2 spots, but hey, when people lose, that's what happens. Iowa dropped down to 21. I'm glad they kept Iowa ranked. They had a literally last second play to beat a top 10 team, and the Oregon kicker made the field goal. So you can't really fault them from that. They kind of did what they were expected to do in a sense. Cincinnati, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know why I put Cincinnati at 21. Maybe I just have a soft spot for Sorsby and Cincinnati, but at 25, I think they deserve to be ranked. Putting them at 25 is fine with me. I would kind of question, I guess if you go win for win comparatively versus USF, who's USF beat versus Cincinnati, USF probably has better wins. I think USF also has a worse loss in the sense. Not saying Memphis isn't a great team, but comparatively to who Cincinnati lost to, they lost to Nebraska, who a 2-loss Power 5 or Power 4 team, and then also Utah, who's your 13th ranked team. So I'm not sure really where the logic is on that. But when it really comes to that point, we're splitting hairs. Overall, I really liked what they did. I think having Georgia Tech ahead of or behind Miami, that is definitely a choice. I'm okay with that choice for them. Personally, I had Georgia Tech ahead just because they've played relatively similar schedules, minus the Notre Dame win, and Georgia Tech has one less loss. Miami has two losses. So um, once again, really, I'm not splitting hairs on that. The ACC is kind of going to figure itself out. Uh, what else did they have differently? They had Utah at 13 behind BYU. I'm okay with that. BYU beat Utah, so I think they should be ranked accordingly. They also had Texas in front of Oklahoma. Also okay with that. I also had that. Um, Vanderbilt. I'm not sure if they got jumped. Yeah, I think so. Vanderbilt stayed, and then Utah jumped. And I guess they probably ranked Cincinnati, and they're like, well, yeah, Utah. I mean, they just beat a ranked team, so we have to move them up, destroyed a ranked team. I can understand the logic there. Vanderbilt, I guess, really didn't deserve to move up, going to overtime with Auburn, who's a losing team. Probably, I don't think they're going to be bowl eligible. I don't think they can unless they win out. So I'm okay with that. The way it's kind of set up, though, is USC and Michigan. They're giving them opportunities for the Big Ten to get a fourth team in. Obviously, they have to take it, and it might be USC's bid might be on. I think USC is ranked at 17 and Michigan's at 18. USC should be ranked for Michigan because they beat Michigan. But I'm curious what happens if USC beats Iowa. They'll probably jump up to top 15. Probably jump in, maybe jump Miami and go for that 15 spot. But then when USC and Oregon play, if Oregon loses, what happens to USC? Because Washington isn't a ranked team anymore. I don't see them getting ranked. So that'll be something to watch. And the ESPN staff, they mentioned it themselves. I've been kind of preaching this for the past couple of weeks. Michigan needs to make whether they make the playoffs or not, solely rely on the Ohio State game, which it should. I don't know the tiebreakers. I'm going to hold myself to that. Then I'm going to look up the ACC tiebreakers and Big Ten tiebreakers for next week's episode to kind of get a better look at it. But if Michigan, they're a one-loss Big Ten team, if they beat Ohio State, there's even a chance that they could win the Big Ten championship versus Indiana. That'd be a pretty tough 2 weeks for Michigan to beat the number one team. Then probably if they beat Ohio State and Indiana, probably become the number one team. So it'd be another number one team back-to-back weeks. But if that was the case and that happened, I think Michigan deserves a at least a home field advantage in the first round of the college football playoffs. The real question kind of that you have or want to talk about here is JMU versus USF. Um, I thought that I thought JMU was going to be the last spot in for the Big 12 or the Group of Five teams over USF, just kind of based off of their rankings last week. Memphis wasn't even ranked, but they were the highest rated Group of Five team, a team that beat USF, and Memphis lost. Then JMU won against Marshall, and the Dukes did not make the top 25, but the Bulls did. So that's probably saying that last week when they did the rankings, Memphis was probably around like the 30th team, and then USF was slightly behind them, which kind of makes sense if you look at the outcome of that game. USF lost by 3, had a chance to kick a game-winning field goal or a game-tying field goal to take to overtime, but was unable to do it. So not too many issues with that, but I'm just kind of curious, is it going to be the American champion, specifically if USF wins out? Right now, if USF wins out, they don't have to worry about any tiebreakers because we talked about on the episode yesterday that the American has their tiebreaker set for if you're ranked the college football playoff by the committee, then you get an automatic spot, not an automatic spot, but if you have a tiebreaker, you get the nod ahead of the other teams. So there could be a situation where the American Conference is looking at USF versus North Texas or USF versus Tulane, and they're not saying, hey, throw this game, but they're really hoping that USF wins because I'm not sure. North Texas, I think, can, based off of some of the metrics I've seen, can jump JMU into the rankings. I'm not sure. Tulane does not have the metrics that USF or North Texas or Memphis had before their most recent loss. I think JMU's kind of power rated in front of Tulane. So that might be their only chance, really. I think best case scenario for the American is they get USF versus North Texas rematch. Both those teams are ranked higher than JMU in most of the metrics. So that kind of guarantees you have a winner going into the college football playoff. So, but yeah, Moving now to what the actual playoff would look like if it ended today. Obviously, Texas is the cutoff team because you need the ACC bid and then also the group of five bid. So as it would lie right now, you'd have USF versus Georgia, Notre Dame versus Oregon, Miami versus Texas Tech, and Texas versus Ole Miss. So the only conference matchup would be Texas versus Ole Miss. I have no qualms against a conference matchup. I know probably SEC fans or fans of SEC teams more likely than SEC fans in general are saying, oh, they're doing that to strategically have it so we can't have more teams advance. I don't think that's really what they're doing. I think that's just kind of how it lies. Reading into it more, I don't think they look into too much like, hey, is this a rematch of teams? Is this something that's already happened? I think they kind of rank them how it is and however it, like play it as it lies. Old golf rules like, hey, if this is the matchup we're going to get because we ranked them this way, that's the matchup we're going to get. We're not going to mess around with any numbers, do a disservice to one team or prop up another team to kind of make it so we're not seeing a repeat or dealing with two conferences or two interconference playing against each other. But yeah, so that'd be Ole Miss hosting Texas. I'm not going to run through exactly who I think the winner would be. I'd probably just go to the second round, what the quarterfinals would be. But in our Ole Miss versus Texas game, ooh, that's hard to say. I mean, Texas defense has been pretty stingy this year. I think I'd give the nod to Ole Miss. Um, Texas Tech versus Miami, though, I think that's probably going to be some of the best interior or at least offensive line versus defensive line trench play that you would see in the whole entire college football playoff, especially Miami's offensive line going up against Texas Tech's defensive line. Um, you know what? I would give Miami the slight nod there. I think they're kind of at a point where their stinkers are out, and if they get lucky enough to make it to the playoff, they're going to take advantage of it. So that would set up a Miami versus Texas A&M matchup. Two teams that have both beat Notre Dame. Speaking of Notre Dame, they would travel all the way to Eugene to play Oregon. That'd be a fun matchup. I think a lot of points in that game. I'm not sold completely on Notre Dame's defense resurgence yet. Do I think they've improved? 100%, but I don't think it's one of the elite defenses like it was last year. And then for Oregon, really at this point, they just have to stay healthy and get healthy. So, or it might be get healthy and stay healthy. Regardless, the current players they have on the field need to stay healthy, and they need to get some guys back. But I think they're poised to make a postseason run, which would set up a nice little revenge story for them against Ohio State. Hopefully, or maybe hopefully not, would be at the Rose Bowl again. That'd be, once again, a great scene. I'm not sure if Oregon fans would want to make the trip back there facing that team again. But maybe they would, and they want to, eat the toad and get their full-on revenge. And then USF versus Georgia. I would like to say USF has a chance, and I think they really do, but it comes down to I think Georgia just has better athletes all over the field. Kirby Smart, you're going to give him a couple weeks to plan for this game. When you give him a couple weeks to game plan, his defense is usually very elite. Mind you, the reason why they lost to Notre Dame last year was not because of the defense's fault. They were in that game, had an opening half kickoff return for Notre Dame, and then also Gunnar Stockton in a bare receiver room trying to will that team to victory. Just couldn't get it done against a very, very talented Notre Dame defense. So the one thing I will say about that is USF kind of got put on the map 2-3 years ago. What is it now? 4 years ago maybe. But there was 3 years ago. There was a game in South Florida, rainy game. I think it was Ty Simpson's first action as an Alabama quarterback, not in a blowout situation, but he actually had to start Buckner, who was the Notre Dame placeholder this most recent year that fumbled the snap against A&M. He followed Tommy Rees that year, and people in Tuscaloosa weren't happy about Jalen Milroe, so Nick Saban started Buckner, and that game was a lot closer and a lot more uncomfortable for Alabama fans than it should have been. But USF, they can give some teams some fit. Specifically, that offense is kind of the same offense that Josh Heupel runs that has given Georgia fits, obviously. Not to the point where they've lost games, but also it gave Nick Saban offenses or defenses fit. So I don't think that'd be just a clear cut. Yep, roll them out there and see what happens. I think USF would come ready to play. They beat Florida, and Georgia just only won by 4 against Florida last week on a neutral site. So who knows? But I'm still going Georgia in that. Setting up a Georgia-Alabama rematch. Georgia and Alabama fans probably aren't happy about that. They feel like they play each other enough as it is. But hey, that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, Georgia-Alabama, then it'd be Oregon-Ohio State, Miami versus Texas A&M, and then Ole Miss versus Indiana. So you've got a nice combination of some kind of new blood, but also some of the blue bloods in there. Would be good to see. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have for this episode. Trying to think. Maction's on right now. If you didn't see the picks, probably too late for you to get them in. But at least you can look at the results after the fact and see if I was right. I'm playing around with kind of a new model, and this model doesn't really rely much on the actual ratings of the team per se. It's more like statistic driven, and then also kind of something that I've been noticing a lot in college football. And I touched on this previously, but college football nerds have also done a bit on this. Is time of possession and then also offense efficiency versus defense efficiency. So basically, your defense efficiency is, okay, how many yards do you give up before you allow points? Are you kind of the bend, don't break? What is the type of thing? Like if people are getting points on you or people are getting yards on you, are they scoring? Or are you allowing teams to get drives, but you're able to kind of withhold that? And then for offense, hey, do you need 500 yards to score 35 points? Or are you more so a team that can kind of go in methodical drives, and then once you get into the red zone, kind of we're talking about Texas Tech, you convert in the red zone. And then also just the overall possession counter. So how many possessions you have, and then your overall time with the possessions. So playing around with that model, but going through that, and I already kind of liked the picks for it anyways, but I took Akron minus 6.5 over, who are they playing? Kent State. Akron over minus 6.5 over Kent State. Also took the over in that game. I think it was at 48.5 when it closed. Then I took the over of 46.5 of Western Michigan versus Ohio. That game should be a closer game, closer to a pick 'em. I like Ohio. I like their quarterback. I've only seen him play 2 games, I guess. It was last week when they had to come from behind win, and then the week 3 or 4 when they played West Virginia and upset West Virginia. So I think the quarterback's a solid college quarterback where he's mobile, kind of the dual threat. Not going to wow you with his arm. He's not some crazy athlete, but he's good enough, kind of methodical with how he moves and able to make plays happen. So those are my 3 picks for today. Hopefully they turned out good. Oh, also big news. Just got it set up. I know most of my following has been on YouTube right now, but I'll leave the links in my bio or in the comment section. But I'm now up on Spotify or up on Apple Podcasts and waiting for my approval to get up on Spotify. I know for some people it's a lot harder to just listen and sit down and watch YouTube videos. So I am out on those 2 podcast platforms. We're going to get out on all of them, but I wanted to hit those 2 first and put my focus there just because I know those are probably the most commonly used ones. But as always, if you like the video, please give it a like. Subscribe if you've learned something new today, or if you just find me interesting. Leave a comment with any questions you have. Tuesdays kind of my raise responses, mailbag days, where I answer those questions. And I'll see you guys back on Friday for a big game breakdown. Appreciate it.